I've been a fire investigator for 11 years. State certified, IAAI member, 200 and change cases closed. I've worked everything from grease fires in Section 8 kitchens to warehouse jobs where the accelerant was so obvious you could smell it from the parking lot before you even suited up. I've testified in court 14 times. I've been wrong once, an electrical fault I initially classed as undetermined, later confirmed by the manufacturer's recall. I'm telling you this so you understand, I am not someone who sees things that aren't there. I am not someone who reaches for unlikely explanations. I am trained, specifically and rigorously, to follow evidence toward the most mundane possible conclusion. Which is why I need you to understand how difficult it is for me to tell you about the Garrity Road fires. It started in October. A single-family residence on Garrity Road in Hardin County, a 1,400 square foot ranch, built 1978, vinyl siding, standard wood frame construction. The call came in at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. Engine 9 responded, had it knocked down within 40 minutes. One occupant, a 63-year-old woman named Doris Pelham, was transported with smoke inhalation. She survived. I arrived on scene at 6:15 that morning. Standard procedure. Walk the exterior first, photograph, note ventilation points, then work inward. The fire had been confined mostly to one bedroom, the back southeast corner, with extension into the hallway and moderate smoke damage throughout. A contained fire, structurally. Not remarkable. What was remarkable was the origin. I spent 4 hours processing that bedroom. The V pattern on the east wall was clean and well-defined, pointing down toward a region near the baseboard. Normal. I measured char depth at multiple points, deepest along the baseboard itself, tapering as you moved outward and upward. Consistent with a low point of origin, fire traveling up and out. Textbook. But the material at the base of the V, the baseboard itself, the drywall behind it, the framing, was intact. Not lightly damaged. Not partially consumed. Intact. The char existed on the surface of materials that showed no structural degradation beneath. I pulled a section of drywall and the gypsum behind the char was white. Not calcinated. Not even warm discolored. I took my depth gauge to the baseboard trim and the char was, I wrote this down in my field notes, I still have them, approximately 1/16 inch, surface only, with no measurable penetration into substrate. The fire had burned outward from this point with enough intensity to consume a mattress, melt a plastic laundry basket into slag, and char ceiling joists. But the point of origin itself appeared untouched beneath a cosmetic layer of black. I classified it undetermined. It bothered me, but not enough. One anomaly in 200 cases is a statistical certainty. I wrote my report, filed it, moved on. 3 weeks later, 4280 Garrity Road. A half-mile east of the Pelham house. This one was a detached garage. Owner wasn't home, neighbor called it in. By the time the trucks arrived, the structure was fully involved, nothing to save. I processed it 2 days later once the debris cooled enough to work safely. Same pattern. Different structure, different materials, different accelerant profile, meaning no accelerant at all, in either case, but the same fundamental impossibility at the origin. The pore pattern, if you could call it that, radiated outward from the concrete slab floor near the back wall. The concrete at the center of the pattern was clean. Not just unspalled. Clean. As if someone had poured the slab yesterday and then set everything above it on fire. I pulled my report on the Pelham house and laid them side by side at my desk. It was 10 at night. The office was empty, just me, the fluorescent tubes buzzing overhead, the building's HVAC cycling in that low mechanical rhythm you stop hearing after a while until suddenly you hear it again. 2 fires. Same road. Same impossible origin characteristic. The fire burns outward and upward with normal, explicable behavior, but the point of origin is a surface that the fire appears to have emerged from without damaging. I called Terry Moe back the next morning. Terry's been an investigator in the county north of mine for 15 years. Good man. Methodical. Not prone to speculation. I told him what I had and he was quiet for a long time. You're saying the fire started in the material but didn't consume it. I'm saying the fire started at the material. Emerged from it. The material is cosmetically charred but structurally pristine. Like the fire came out of it the way water comes out of a pipe. Materials don't do that, Elise. I know. He drove down that weekend. We went to both sites together. The Pelham house was still standing, Doris was staying with her daughter in Flemingsburg, and I'd gotten permission to re-enter. Terry spent 2 hours on his knees with his own depth gauge, his own sample kit. He didn't say much. When he finally stood up, his knees popped and he looked at me with an expression I'd never seen on his face. I want to see the garage, he said. The garage was a debris field, but the slab was still there. We cleared ash and fallen framing members from the back wall area until we exposed the section I'd flagged. Terry crouched down and ran his palm across the concrete. This is wrong, he said. I know. No, I mean, he pressed harder. Feel this. I knelt beside him and put my hand on the slab. The concrete was warm. Not hot. Warm, like skin. Like the inside of a closed hand. This was November. The ambient temperature was 41 degrees. There was no subsurface heat source, no pipes, no radiant system. The garage had been a bare slab with no utilities run to it. We both pulled our hands back at the same time. What the hell? Terry said quietly. I didn't answer. I was looking at our handprints. Where our palms had rested, the concrete was fractionally darker. Not charred. Not burned. Just darker. As if our touch had left a shadow that was seeping up from below rather than deposited from above. We drove back to my office without speaking. It was dark by then. The parking lot was empty except for my truck and Terry's county vehicle. The building's exterior lights cast that sodium yellow wash that makes everything look like a photograph from the wrong decade. We sat in my office with the door closed and Terry finally said what I'd been thinking for 3 weeks. It's not a fire that's burning something. Something is trying to get out, and heat is the byproduct. I wanted to argue. I wanted to reach for electrical fault, chemical reaction, geothermal anomaly, anything with a mechanism I could test and a literature I could cite. But I'd already tested. I'd already looked. There was no mechanism that produced surface char without substrate damage while simultaneously generating enough thermal energy to fully involve a structure. It didn't exist in the science. Not in NFPA 921, not in any journal I'd ever read, not in any case study from any conference I'd attended. If something is trying to get out, I said slowly, then we need to ask what happens when it does. Or what happens when it doesn't. That stopped me. Terry was staring at the wall behind my desk. His face was doing something complicated. The Pelham house, he said. The fire was suppressed. 40-minute knockdown. The garage was a total loss, nobody got to it in time. He looked at me. What if the difference matters? I thought about Doris Pelham in her hospital bed. Smoke inhalation. Alive, recovering, back with her daughter. I thought about the garage, empty, no occupants, burned to nothing. You're saying in the garage, it got out. I'm saying in the garage, the fire completed itself. Nobody stopped it. And the garage is gone, but the origin point is still warm. Still doing something. He paused. In the Pelham house, the fire was put out. What happened to whatever was trying to emerge? I didn't sleep that night. At 3 a.m. I was sitting in my kitchen with the case file open and a cup of coffee going cold and the house so quiet I could hear the refrigerator compressor cycling and the clock above the stove ticking and nothing else, nothing at all, and I was thinking about the word suppressed. We suppress fires. That's the language. Suppression. It's a good word for what we do. We don't destroy fire, we deny it oxygen, we cool it below ignition temperature, we interrupt the chemical reaction. We suppress it. We push it back down. But if what Terry was suggesting had any validity, if the heat was a byproduct of something moving through material, trying to reach open air, then suppression didn't just stop a fire. It trapped something inside. The third fire happened 9 days later. Same road, half a mile further east. A small storage building on a rural property, no more than 10 by 12, corrugated metal walls on a concrete pad, used for lawn equipment and paint cans. This time, I got the call before the fire department. I know how that sounds. Let me explain. After the second fire, I'd been driving Garrity Road at night. Not every night, 2 or 3 times a week, on my way home from the office, I'd take the long route. I told myself I was monitoring. Maintaining situational awareness. The truth was something less professional than that. I was watching. At 11:40 p.m. on a Wednesday, I was driving east on Garrity Road with my windows down despite the cold, and I smelled it. Not smoke, not yet. Something else. A mineral smell, like hot stone, like the air above a kiln. And then I saw the glow, not flames, not yet. A dull orange radiance from inside the storage building, visible through the gap between the corrugated walls and the pad. I pulled over. I called 911 and reported it. And then I sat in my truck for 3 minutes and watched. The glow intensified. It wasn't flickering the way fire flickers, it was steady, pulsing slowly, like breathing. The metal walls of the building began to tick and ping as they expanded thermally. I could feel the heat from 40 feet away, through my closed truck door. And then the fire breached. It came through the walls in 4 places simultaneously, not spreading, not growing, but arriving. One moment the walls were dark metal with an orange underglow, the next, fire was pouring outward from the seams as if something pressurized behind them had found the gaps. Within 90 seconds the entire structure was involved. Engine 6 arrived at 11:58. I was out of my truck by then, standing at the road, watching. The captain, a woman named Ruiz whom I'd worked with before, came to me immediately. "How long?" she asked. 18 minutes, roughly. It went fast. She looked at the building. It was already collapsing inward, the metal walls buckling. "Anyone inside?" "It's a storage shed." "No." "Then we let it go. Protect the exposures." They set up a line to keep the fire from reaching the main house, 80 feet north. The storage building burned completely. It took less than 30 minutes for the structure to be reduced to twisted metal and ash on a concrete slab. I was back at dawn. Same procedure. Walk the exterior, photograph, work inward. And this time I knew what I was looking for. The slab. 11:47 a.m. Clear sky, temperature 38 degrees. I knelt at the center of the slab and put my hand down. Cold. Not warm. Not residually heated from the fire. Cold. Colder than ambient. Colder than concrete should be on a November morning in Kentucky. Cold the way a stone is cold when it's been in shade for a long time. I sat back on my heels and thought about what Terry had said. What happens when it doesn't get out? What happens when it does? The garage, suppression failed, fire completed, origin point still warm days later. The storage shed, fire completed, no suppression attempted, origin point cold the next morning. Cold the way something is cold after something warm has left it. I called Terry from the slab. He answered on the first ring. There's been another one, I said. Same road. And this time it burned completely and the origin is cold. Not warm. Cold. Whatever was in there, it's gone. Silence on the line. Then, I'm coming down. Bring Waverly, I said. Lena Waverly, a materials scientist at the State Fire Marshal's lab. We'd both worked with her on previous cases. She was the kind of person who would look at impossible data and not flinch. What are you going to tell her? The truth. Same thing I told you. Elise. His voice was careful. If you're right about this, if something is moving through solid material and producing thermal energy as it tries to exit, then every structure fire we've ever knocked down. I know. Every one. I know, Terry. He didn't say anything else for a long time. I could hear him breathing. I could hear, faintly, the sound of his office, the same institutional hum that mine had, that same fluorescent HVAC drone that every government building in every county in this state shares. I'll bring Waverly, he said. I'll bring the thermal imaging setup too. If that slab is cold, I want to know how cold. I want to know if there's a gradient. I want to know if the cold goes down. He arrived the next afternoon with Lena in the passenger seat of his county vehicle. She was already reading my reports, all three, on a tablet, scrolling back and forth between the photographs. You're sure about the substrate integrity, she said, before she'd even fully closed the car door. I'm sure. I'll show you the Pelham house. The section I pulled is still in evidence storage. Show me the slab first. We walked to the debris field. Lena moved differently than Terry and I. She wasn't looking for burn patterns or char depth. She was looking at the material itself. She crouched at the center of the slab and produced a contact thermometer from her bag. 31.4 degrees, she said. Ambient was 36. It's colder than the air, Terry said. It's colder than it should be thermodynamically possible for this mass to be, given solar exposure and ground temperature. She moved the thermometer to the edge of the slab. 35.8 at the perimeter. There's a gradient. The cold is localized to the center. She looked up at us. Her expression wasn't confused. It was focused, the way she got when data was interesting rather than anomalous. I'd always liked that about Lena. She didn't waste time being baffled. She moved directly to hypothesis. If heat was generated here and moved outward, she said, and if the substrate lost no mass despite being the apparent origin, then something converted energy from this material without consuming it. Like a catalyst. The material facilitated a reaction but wasn't the fuel. What was the fuel? Terry asked. Lena stood up. I don't know. But whatever it was, it's not here anymore. And the material it moved through lost thermal energy in the process. That's why it's cold. It's not just absent heat, it's heat that was taken. We went to the Pelham house next. I still had my scene access, Doris hadn't returned, and the insurance claim was still pending. The bedroom was exactly as I'd left it. Damaged, charred, smelling of wet ash and age. Lena went directly to the baseboard area. She took temperature readings first. 42.6, she said. Ambience 36 outside, I said. And maybe 40 inside, given the closed structure and solar heating through the windows. She paused. This is warmer than the room. That tracks, Terry said. The fire here was suppressed. Knocked down at 40 minutes. Whatever was trying to come through is still in there, I said. Lena looked at me. Then at the wall. Then she put her palm flat against the baseboard, the way Terry and I had done with the garage slab. It's not just warm, she said quietly. It's vibrating. I crouched down beside her and pressed my own hand to the wood. She was right. Beneath the surface char, beneath the intact wood grain, there was a tremor. Not mechanical, not the kind of vibration you feel from pipes or settling or distant traffic. It was rapid and irregular and very, very faint. Like something shivering. It's been 6 weeks since this fire, Terry said. His voice was flat. Controlled. 6 weeks since suppression. And it's still in there. Lena pulled her hand back and looked at her palm. No marks this time. No darkening. Just her hand, pale in the dim room. I need to take a sample, she said. I need to get this material back to the lab and image it. Cross-section it. Look at the microstructure. Take it, I said. I'll process the chain of custody. She cut a 6-inch section of baseboard using an oscillating tool from her kit. The vibration was visible as she cut, the blade chattered slightly more than it should have, and the material flexed in a way that wood doesn't flex. When the section came free, she held it in her gloved hands and looked at it. It's warm all the way through, she said. Uniformly. That's not residual heat from a 6-week-old fire. That's active. Something is generating thermal energy inside this material right now. She bagged it. Labeled it. Logged it. We drove back to my office and I completed the evidence transfer paperwork while Lena secured the sample in a cooler in Terry's vehicle. Then the three of us sat in my office with the door closed and the overhead fluorescents casting their flat white light and the building empty around us because it was after 7 on a Thursday and everyone else had gone home. Okay, Lena said. Let me say what we're all thinking and then let's decide what to do about it. Go ahead. The fires on Garrity Road are not fires. They're not combustion events in the traditional sense. Something is embedded in solid material, concrete, wood, gypsum, and it is producing thermal energy as it attempts to move through that material to open air. The heat is a byproduct of its movement. When the movement completes, when it exits the material, the fire is over and the substrate returns to below ambient temperature because energy was extracted from it in the process. When the movement is interrupted, when the fire is suppressed, the thing remains trapped and continues generating heat indefinitely at a low level. Terry and I said nothing. The question, Lena continued, is what happens to it after it exits. Is it still there? Is it in the air? Does it dissipate? And the harder question, the one I don't have an answer for yet, is how many of these are there? You've identified 3.5-mile stretch of one road. How many fires have we suppressed, have fire departments suppressed, that share this origin characteristic? How many of these things are trapped inside walls, inside foundations, inside structures all over this state, all over this country, because we stopped the fire before they could get out? The building's HVAC unit cycled off. The silence was sudden and total. 3:17 a.m. I woke up in my bedroom. The furnace wasn't running. The house was cold, not dangerously, but enough that I was aware of it. I lay still and listened. Nothing. Then I put my hand flat against the wall behind my headboard. Warm. Barely. Just barely. Just enough to notice if you were looking for it. Just enough that I pulled my hand back and sat up in the dark and did not touch the wall again for the rest of the night. I told Terry the next morning. He was quiet for a long time. Has your house ever had a fire? He asked. No. Any heat damage? Any history of? No. Nothing. It's a 2003 build. Clean history. Then maybe it's not what we think. Maybe it's normal thermal variation. You don't believe that? No, he said. I don't. Lena called us both that afternoon. She'd imaged the baseboard cross-section. You need to come look at this, she said. Her voice was steady, but there was something underneath it, not fear, exactly. Something more like the sound a person makes when they've confirmed a hypothesis they wished they could disprove. Terry and I drove up to the state lab in Frankfurt the next morning. It's a clean, modern facility, all tile floors and stainless steel and equipment that hums in specific frequencies you learn to distinguish from one another when you work there. Lena met us at the door and took us straight back to her imaging station. She pulled up the cross-section on her monitor. The baseboard had been sliced perpendicular to its length, exposing the interior grain structure of the wood. Look at the cell structure, she said, zooming in. I'm not a materials scientist, but I've looked at enough burned wood under magnification to know what normal looks like. Normal wood cells are rectangular, arranged in rows, with cell walls of varying thickness depending on species and growth conditions. Burned wood shows disruption of these cells, collapse, carbonization, vapor-driven fracturing. This sample showed neither normal nor burned. The cell structure was intact, perfectly preserved, no thermal damage visible at the microscopic level. But within each cell, in the open lumen where you'd normally see nothing or occasionally resin or moisture, there was something else. It looked like frost. Not literally ice. Lena had measured the sample temperature and it was still 42 degrees, but the structure of it resembled frost. Crystalline. Branching. Occupying the interior of each cell with a delicate, repeating geometry that was clearly not organic and clearly not a byproduct of any combustion process I'd ever seen documented. What is that? Terry asked. I don't know, Lena said. I've sent a sample for spectroscopy. But I can tell you what it's not. It's not mineral deposition. It's not fungal. It's not any form of chemical residue from suppression agents. And it's growing. Growing. I imaged this sample yesterday and again this morning. The crystalline structure has extended approximately 6% in 12 hours. It's filling the cell lumens progressively from the center of the sample outward. She pulled up a second image, the same cross-section, earlier timestamp. The difference was subtle but visible. The frost-like structures were slightly less extensive, slightly less branched. "It's growing inside the wood," I said. "It's growing inside the material it's trapped in," Lena said. "If this is the same thing that was trying to exit through thermal energy, if it's the same phenomenon, then suppressing the fire didn't kill it or stop it. It just forced it to find another way to move. A slower way. And it's been doing that for 6 weeks." "A slower way toward what?" Terry asked. Lena pulled up a third image. This one was a thermal map of the sample, color-coded. The warmest point was dead center. The heat radiated outward from there in a perfect sphere. "Toward the surface," she said. "It's still trying to get out." We stood there in the clean hum of the lab, the three of us, looking at this image on the monitor, this false color representation of something that existed inside a piece of wood from an old woman's bedroom wall. Something that had been there for 6 weeks. Something that was alive, or at minimum active, and growing, and warm, and moving toward open air. "What happens when it reaches the surface?" I asked. "If it behaves the way the other two did, the way the garage and the storage shed behaved, then it exits. It produces heat as it crosses the material boundary. It enters open air. And then," she stopped. "And then we don't know," Terry finished. "We don't know." I thought about Doris Pelham asleep in that bedroom. The fire at 2:47 a.m. Engine 9 arriving, knocking it down, saving the house, saving Doris. A good outcome by every metric we use. A save. A successful suppression. And the thing that was trying to emerge, pushed back inside the wall, growing crystalline structures in the wood cells for 6 weeks. Still trying. Still warm. "There's something else," Lena said. She pulled up another image, this one wider, showing the full cross-section at lower magnification. "Look at the pattern of growth. It's not random. It's not simply expanding in all directions." She traced her finger along the monitor. The crystalline structures, seen at this scale, weren't uniform. They were denser in one direction, toward what would have been the interior surface of the wall. Toward the room. Toward where Doris slept. "It's directional," I said. "It's oriented toward the occupied space. Whatever is in this material, it's not just trying to get out. It's trying to get out into the room." 4:17 p.m. Drive back to Hardin County. Terry and I didn't talk for the first 40 minutes. The highway was flat and gray and the sky was low and the bare trees on either side made a repeating skeletal pattern that I watched without really seeing. "How many house fires were there in Kentucky last year?" Terry said finally. "Around 8,000, residential." "How many were knocked down?" "How many were successful suppressions?" "Most. 60-something% are contained to the room of origin or less. 5,000 fires. Contained. Suppressed." He was gripping the steering wheel harder than necessary. "How many of them had origin characteristics we didn't look closely enough at? How many points of origin did we accept as undetermined without checking the substrate integrity? Without going back days later with a thermometer? Terry. How many are sitting in walls right now? Right now, today, in houses where families are sleeping? We don't know that. You felt it in your wall. In your bedroom. In a house that's never had a fire. I didn't answer that. I watched the road. Maybe they don't all need a fire to move, he said. Maybe the fire is the last resort. Maybe most of the time they move slowly, the way the crystalline Lena's sample is moving, and we never notice because they never generate enough heat to trigger an ignition event. Maybe the ones that catch fire are the ones that are desperate. The ones that are stuck. Or dying, I said. I don't know why I said it. It just came out. Terry looked at me. What if the heat is distress, I said. What if the fire is, I don't know, panic? A last-ditch movement. They're normally slow and quiet and they migrate through material at a rate that doesn't produce noticeable thermal energy. But sometimes they get stuck. In a foundation. In a wall. In something they can't move through slowly. And they push harder. And the pushing produces heat. And the heat catches what's around them on fire. And then we come and we put the fire out and we push them back in and they're trapped worse than before. The car was very quiet. Just road noise. Just the heater cycling. If you're right, Terry said, then every time we suppress a fire at one of these origin points, we're not saving a building. We're burying something alive. He pulled off the highway. We sat in a gas station parking lot with the engine running and neither of us spoke for what felt like a very long time. The lights of the gas station threw flat white patches across the windshield. A truck passed on the road behind us, its weight making the ground tremble faintly. Finally Terry said, "What do we do?" "I don't know." "Do we report this?" "To whom?" "With what recommendation?" "Hey, maybe don't put out some of the fires because they might contain trapped entities trying to escape. We need more data. We need to know if this is Garrity Road or if this is everywhere. We need to know if the crystalline structures appear at other suppressed fire origins. We need to go back to the Pelham house," Terry said. "We need to know how much that crystal has grown. We need to know how close it is to the surface. And what do we do when it reaches the surface?" He turned and looked at me fully. "We let it out," he said. "We let it out, Elise." I didn't answer. I was thinking about Doris. About her bedroom. About the fact that whatever was in that wall had been oriented toward her sleeping body. Trying to get into the room where she lay. Maybe to escape. Maybe. But I've been doing this job for 11 years. And the one thing you learn, the one thing that NFPA 921 teaches you, that every instructor drills into you, that every case reinforces, is that you do not reach for the explanation you want. You do not allow your hypothesis to outrun your evidence. You follow the data to whatever conclusion it demands, even if that conclusion is undetermined. Even if that conclusion is, "I don't know." We didn't know what it wanted. We didn't know if want was even the right word. We didn't know if letting it out was liberation or hatching. "Lena's sample," I said. "It's still in her lab. Still growing. If it reaches the surface of that piece of wood, if it exits in a controlled environment, we can observe what happens. We can see what it does when it gets out. Before we make any decisions about the Pelham house, we wait for Lena's sample. And if it doesn't exit cleanly, if it ignites, then Lena has fire suppression in the lab. She can contain it." "You mean she can trap it again?" I closed my eyes. "Yeah," I said. "I mean she can trap it again." We waited. 3 days. Lena called us every morning with measurements. The crystalline growth was accelerating, 8% daily now, up from 6. It was 22 hours from reaching the exterior surface of the sample, based on her projections. On the third morning, she called at 5:45 a.m. I was already awake. I hadn't been sleeping well, kept waking at 3, 4 in the morning with my hand against the wall behind my bed, feeling for warmth I couldn't be sure was real. "It's at the surface," Lena said. It reached the cut face of the sample at approximately 4 a.m. I have it on time-lapse. What happened? Nothing. Nothing. It reached the surface and stopped. The crystalline structure is flush with the cut face of the wood but has not extended beyond it. No thermal event. No ignition. No emergence. It's just there. At the boundary. Like it's waiting. Waiting for what? Silence. Then, I put my hand near it. Not touching, about 2 inches from the surface. And the thermal reading spiked. 3 degrees in 4 seconds. When I pulled my hand away, it dropped back to baseline. It responds to proximity. It responds to proximity. To living proximity, specifically. I held a metal tool at the same distance. No response. A latex glove filled with warm water. No response. My hand, response. Immediate and measurable. I felt something move in my chest. Not fear exactly. Something colder and more specific. "Don't touch it," I said. I wasn't going to. What's it doing now? Sitting at the surface. Temperature is baseline. No growth. No change. It's stable. As far as I can tell, it's done trying to get out. It's at the boundary. And it's responding to biological presence within a 2-inch range. It's waiting for someone to get close. That's one interpretation. What's another? She was quiet for a moment. That it's reached the point where it can interact with what it was moving toward all along. And that interaction isn't thermal. It isn't physical emergence. It's, I don't know, Elise. Proximity. Contact. Something I don't have a word for. I thought about Doris Pelham sleeping 6 inches from a wall with this inside it. I thought about 6 weeks of sleeping next to something growing toward her. Something that responded to biological nearness. Something that got warmer when she was close. I thought about my own bedroom wall. "I need to come up there," I said. "Today. And I need to bring something with me." "What?" "My depth gauge. My thermal imager. My sample kit." I paused. "And a piece of my bedroom wall." The drive to Frankfurt took 90 minutes. I'd cut the sample that morning before I called Lena back, a section of drywall from behind my headboard, 9 inches by 6 inches, cut clean with a utility knife. The gypsum behind the paint was white and unremarkable. There was no char. There was no visible anomaly. But when I'd pressed the thermal imager against it before cutting, the reading was 2.4 degrees above the surrounding wall. 2.4 degrees. It could be nothing. A hot water pipe nearby, a stud cavity with slightly different insulation. A normal thermal variation in a normal house. But I'd lived in that house for 7 years and I'd never felt warmth from that wall until 3 weeks ago. Until after I pressed my hand to the concrete slab on Garrity Road. Until after I pressed my hand to the baseboard in Doris Pelham's bedroom. I don't know what that means. I'm telling you that clearly, I don't know. But I brought the sample to Lena and she imaged it that afternoon, and at 6:47 p.m. she called me into the imaging room, and the cross-section of my drywall was on the monitor, and inside the gypsum matrix, between the crystalline planes of calcium sulfate dihydrate, there were structures. Small. Sparse. Early. But there. The same branching, frost-like geometry. The same directional orientation, toward the interior surface. Toward where I sleep. How long? I asked. Lena measured. Calculated. Based on the density and the growth rate we've observed in the Pelham sample, weeks. Maybe a month. A month until it reaches the surface. A month until it reaches the boundary. And then it waits. Based on what we've seen, yes. Then it waits. I stood in that lab under the clean fluorescent lights, surrounded by equipment that hums and measures and quantifies, and I understood something that I can't properly explain. It wasn't dread. It wasn't horror. It was a question. A question that I now have to answer, and that I don't know how to answer, and that my training, all 11 years of it, gives me absolutely no framework for. When it reaches the surface of my bedroom wall. When it sits at the boundary, flush with the paint, waiting. When it responds to my warmth in the dark at 3 a.m. Do I press my hand against it? Do I give it what it's moving toward? Or do I do what I've been trained to do, what every firefighter is trained to do, what every protocol demands, and suppress it? Because I've seen what suppression does. It doesn't stop anything. It just makes the attempt more desperate. More thermal. More dangerous to everything around it. And I've seen what completion looks like, a cold slab, an absence, a thing that was there and now isn't. Gone. Released. Into what, we don't know. Terry wants to let them out. All of them. He's been researching historical fires with undetermined origins, pulling case files, looking for the substrate anomaly, finding it more often than I'm comfortable knowing. There are hundreds. He thinks there might be thousands. Lena wants more data. More imaging. More samples. She's requested access to the State Fire Lab's archived evidence, decades of origin samples stored in climate-controlled rooms. She believes she'll find the crystalline structures in old samples too. Structures that nobody looked for because nobody knew to look. And me. I go home every night to a house with something inside the walls. Something that might have been there for years, moving slowly, too slowly to ignite, and only now, only since I touched that slab, since I pressed my hand to the baseboard, since I made contact, only now is it growing fast enough to measure. Maybe I accelerated it. Maybe by touching those surfaces, by being the warm, living presence at the boundary, I woke something up. Not just in those materials. In mine. I don't know. That's my answer. The answer I was trained to accept. The hardest answer. The honest answer. I don't know. But in a month, I'll have to decide. The thing inside my wall will reach the surface. It will wait at the boundary. It will warm when I'm near. And I'll have to choose, make contact, or call the crew and put it out. Save the structure. Bury it deeper. Add my house to the list of suppressed sites where something sits and grows and tries again, more desperately, years from now. Or put my hand against the wall in the dark. Let it finish. And find out what comes out. Last night I lay in bed and I swear, I felt it. Not warmth this time. Not vibration. Pressure. Gentle. Barely there. Like a palm pressing back from the other side. I didn't pull away. I don't know what that means yet. But I'm beginning to think that undetermined isn't going to be good enough this time. Not for the report. Not for me.